Our next topic is presented by Mr. Joe Yaiullo. The topic is titled Bonsai Reef Keeping in a 20,000 gallon box. That's rather impressive. Joe, an admitted coral holic, currently feeds his ever-increasing addiction with nurturing his 20,000 gallon reef tank, which contains corals that date back over 26 years. While he has admitted his addiction, he has no plans of seeking a cure and enjoys talking with reef keepers from around the world. Joe has been featured in many reef-keeping books and magazines and has presented lectures in Canada, Germany, Sweden, Finland, England, Fiji, Monaco, France, the Netherlands, and Italy, and throughout the USA, including several MACNAs dating back to 1994, and he's here for you today. Mr. Joe Yaiullo.
Great. Great. Well, thanks to the gang here for organizing a great MACNA. I'm looking forward to getting to the floor and inviting us down. So kind of a new presentation for me. Bonsai reef keeping is a term that I had come up with, well over 20-something years ago when we were talking about these corals that were finally able to grow in a captive environment and realizing we need to trim these down. So it was kind of like, well, bonsai reef keeping. So, well, not this kind of bonsai, for those of you that were here from MACNA when Dana Carvey won his award, not that kind of bonsai, but kind of this bonsai. Just a brief description of what bonsai is, and kind of have to add in a little bit of the art of growing ornamental, artificially dwarfed trees or shrubs. We can just put in corals and anemones and things like that. So that's kind of where I'm going, and even at 20,000 gallons. So a lot of things that I'm going to talk about today are applicable to any size tank. There's a lot of things going on in the world today. This is happening just now too. Luckily it's not coming near us, but just for a quick perspective on where the aquarium is on Long Island, New York, it's about an hour and a half outside of New York City. I was talking with Gerald Hesslinger earlier today, and I invited him to the aquarium, and he says he likes to avoid the big cities and things. And East End is beautiful. We have wineries and duck farms and all kinds of great stuff, great oceans. We do like to have other things besides corals that totally involve my life. Like Todd said, it's important to have those support networks, things to do on the outside, getting to the beach. I have to update that picture there with my boys. Some cycling, my dad taught me some wood carving. So this next video that I'm going to show is a little off topic for this conversation, but it's applicable to every topic. So sit back and enjoy. It just runs for a couple of minutes. Oop. Okay, why is it not running? And I might have to adjust volumes. There's no volume right now, but. There should be a lot more volume. Technical people? Anybody good at lip reading? If it's going to take too long, we can skip it, but it would be sad.
Oh, it's hearing it from the HDMI, that's why.
Okay.
We have to go into the settings, so it's not doing that.
So skip?
About it.
Darn it.
Not that long ago. I was Tank of the Month, man.
There we go.
You wanted him here with you?
Can I start this over?
Support, definitely, yeah. And how long have you had this tank?
6 or 7 years, closer
We'll
to
start
7.
from here.
How big is it?
It's a 220 with a 50-gallon sump.
Sure. How are your nitrates?
Good.
Define good.
Well, the water's clear.
So is vodka. You clean your pumps? Protein skimmer?
The protein skimmer broke about 2 years ago, but nothing in the tank changed, so I just left it off.
Wow. Okay. How are your phosphates?
Between 2 and 3 parts per million. Well, hey, Richard Ross, Aquarist of the Year, said his are above 3, so I think I'm okay.
Yeah, I don't think he was actually recommending that. What's your pH run?
Around 8.
And you calibrate regularly?
Yep.
You change your probes?
Well, they're not broken. Greg Bigerman said they last pretty much forever, so...
Okay, Craig Bingman, and he would never say that. Do you change your light bulbs?
Well, they still come on. Sanjay said...
Nah! Please. Bit of a name dropper there, aren't you? Hey, you know, actually, would you mind just showing me your system?
I don't think I can do that. It's a little too soon for me. But I'm sure he would love to show you my stuff. Yeah. Oh God, what is it? OTS? Is it old tank syndrome?
Well...
Oh God, I knew it was!
No, it actually looks more like your tank is suffering from LARS.
Lars, what's that?
Well, it's an acronym.
Oh
and
man, that sounds bad. Is that a parasite?
No, it stands for lazy ass reefer syndrome.
Oh. Yeah. What can I do about that?
Well, a number of things. Start changing your water, for one. Get a hold of Bob Stark over at ESV. But first things first, you're gonna have to get off your ass.
So, pretty much, I'm glad that, thank you to the tech guys for getting that through. Everything that we discussed before or after any of that really relies on staying ahead of LARS. But planning your systems, planning your tanks really relies a lot on planning it early, figure out what you're going to do. And here we are planning what was and is a public aquarium now that's been open 17 years. And reef keeping goes back quite a ways. This picture is resurfacing again. I think it was in Austin's presentation as well. But just going through a few bullet points here. When we first started reef keeping back in, well, I started in the late 80s. This was all a whole lecture on how to keep reefs. Not much was known. So yeah, I had no gray hair. I had really big glasses. Julian had quite a bit of hair and a lot of denim. I thought that was pretty cool. So starting your tank, building your tank, again, independent of tank size, you want your rockwork to be really functional. This is a quarried limestone base rock with lots of open spaces for water flow. Oops, and then we're gonna wanna get rid of the sound from now on going forward, tech guys. Sorry. So here it is, the quarried limestone base rock, about 30,000 pounds in the tank. The tank is 30 feet long, 14 feet front, back, about 6.5 feet deep. So again, doing everything correct from the beginning is going to be able to keep your tanks and fish a lot happier. So this is a short video of the tank. This is from a few months ago. A couple of disclaimers in here. If you see some fish in here and say, wow, I can put those in my tank, Joe had them in his, definitely ask me first. There's reasons why I can get away with certain fish. My hippo tangs look a bit tired in here. There's 3 or 4 of them in there that are left. They're just about 20 years old. So there's a few fish in here that are in there close to 20. So the tank, again, is 17 years old. So you have an east and west side, so you know you have a big tank. But even on this scale tank, you end up having to do this kind of bonsai, this type of pruning, cleaning, excavating, because the corals are growing to such an extent. A lot of these corals did start out as small frags. This video, I think, has to start. So this is a more recent view of the east side of the tank. Now, the entire tank isn't this full of fish. A lot of the fish are on this side because they think they're going to get fed. So, and I'm not recommending this density of fish. And if you are going to have a lot of fish in your tank, make sure they're well fed. Worst thing to see is a tank full of fish that has a tank full of very skinny fish. If you're going to take the risk of having a lot of fish in your tank, you do have to maintain them, feed them. And as Todd has said, maintaining them with a good diet for their health and then for their spawning. And yes, both Todd and Noel have threatened my life on certain fish that were in the tank. So that is true, that were removed. So going back, this is the initial start of the tank with some branch rock on the right side in 2001. And this is a little bit later in 2001 with some of the initial corals being placed in it, with the idea of what the tank is going to grow into. So there's a lot of vertical space still available for the corals to grow. Here's the tank in 2009. I don't know if my laser pointer shows up on these screens. Kind of right there. So some of the corals especially the Monty caps and things, were growing a little bit higher up because not really knowing where they could grow in 6.5 feet deep of water, but then they started overshadowing a lot of corals. So eventually those were removed. This is the Dietrich Stuber aquapore. This is on the west side of 2013 where it was really getting very dense. And then you have to worry about water flow and maintaining the flow to those corals, meeting their biological needs. So either you have to really increase the flow or prune your corals back. I opted for pruning them back a little bit. I'm looking for a certain aesthetic within the tank, not just letting everything grow and become this jumbled mess. So after one dive, I went in and thinned out some of the aquapores, realized it wasn't enough for my aesthetic view, went back in and pruned out a bunch more. So it's really a never-ending chess match with your corals. So it's a constant challenge that you want to stay ahead of. You will never win your opponent, your corals. You will never win this match, but you just want to try and stay ahead of them. So what do you do with all these corals? Well, you can transplant them to other sections of the tank. You can bring them to your local reef club and auction them off. You can send them to other public aquariums. You can start a company called Reef Generation, which we have going on. Sometimes you can't get rid of them and you just crush them up, put them back in your calcium reactor. And that was kind of a crazy thing to think about in years past, that we would actually be growing enough coral to put back into your calcium reactor. I'm going to skip through some of this video, but this is getting ready to dive in the tank. And again, part of this is to deal with a coral that has collapsed, that it's grown too large and it has fallen over, which is a natural means of propagation within the reef and corals. It's a natural way of propagation, and those corals do settle into spots. It's a little disheartening to see your coral when it's fallen over, and but it is a natural progression. And Laura had the pleasure of videoing from the front, and I've got a GoPro on my head there, making my way towards the front of the tank. Excuse the blue lines, that's for polishing out some of the scratches, but I'm approaching a big aquapore that has fallen over. And what I had been starting to do with growing these corals and trying to create a natural look, again, trying to do like a bit of a bonsai thing where you're trying to create, but this big aquapore fell down. It also knocked Sanjay's F-flow over. I'm sure he woke up in the middle of the night startled and felt it. So I'm going to say a little prayer here and try and figure out how to get this big aquapora here on the far left back kind of into position. So even though I had planted this acro as a single branch, which you normally do, you put like that one branch in, then it grows into a big colony, which I had done initially, then you have all that weight on one point. So I had grafted in a bunch of other aquapora branches to fuse in to make it even more stable. But even that was not enough. And then you have this is a frag. So, you know, what do you do with a frag like that? For now, you're just going to toss it down there, because there's no way I'm going to be able to get this acropora back into position as a whole. There's an anemone around the corner here that these clownfish think, well, it is their anemone, but they think the tank is theirs also. So they come over, and we have a little discussion. And they're biting me on the kneecaps. I'm throwing some jabs. They don't care. We're really lucky clowns don't grow as large as sharks. It's because it would not be a good thing. But they're very good at finding where skin is exposed and biting on the skin between your glove and your wetsuit arm. So I'm going to skip through some of this video because I know we're running a little bit late. But it was a matter of breaking down this acropora. But this grew from a 1-inch fragment. Yes, and I did laugh as I was lifting some of these corals when you're thinking about lifting with your knees so you don't throw out your back. Like that's a silly concept to do. But then replacing the coral and getting it growing again. So going to the east side with the live rock and some early placements of corals. Whoa, this thing is like possessed. There we go. So corals are growing in. Again, you can see some Monty caps that are up pretty high in the tank because I thought that's where they needed to be planted, but I realized over time they're really going to overshadow a lot of stuff, so they were removed and some of them were placed down lower. So this big stand of yellow Turbinaria grew in over time. It's about 5 feet across. And I never thought I would touch it, and it took me about 2 weeks of deliberations when I realized from the aesthetics view, and again, kind of getting back to this whole concept of what you want your sculpture, what you want it to look like, so my eye starts twitching because the composition is getting out of frame, and the corals, this coral is now growing so large, it's blocking a lot of corals behind it. It's growing towards the front of the tank. It took me about 2 weeks of silent deliberations, and I finally told Laura, I'm like, listen, I got to get in there and renovate that section. And she almost had a heart attack, and told her I thought about it a lot. But it still causes a lot of anxiety when you finally think about actually finally doing it. But so you do. You just get out a hammer and crowbar and. So here's the Turbinaria, which is beautiful on its own, but again, it was making the tank look smaller because everything was growing to the front. You're trying to maintain a certain aesthetic. So after the first dive, you can see a lot of coral rock was removed. The corals in the center were lowered down. You can start seeing some of the corals behind it, but then it still wasn't enough. So went back into the tank for some more renovations. And we're just going to skim through some of this. But again, you can see how much dead coral skeleton there is underneath those Turbinarias, especially that piece on the right. It goes down about 18 inches of old dead coral. That's how reefs are built. So, but what's happening in your system is that's taking up a lot of space, taking up a lot of water flow possibilities. So I was able to go in, remove a lot, and then sculpt underneath it to open up some caves and some more rock work. The fish love these kind of disturbances. It opens up spaces they couldn't reach, and they can get in there and eat some of the goodies. This piece was really heavy. This was about probably 80 or 90 pounds, this one. But I'm gonna, go fast forward through this one. But again, trying to maintain a look of your tank versus just letting your tank do its thing. And they say things are lighter underwater, but maybe only just by a little bit. So this again was the beginning, second dive, third dive. So you can see things are lower down. Tank is more open again, but it still kind of looks like it's newly planted again. But it doesn't take long for it to grow in and look grown in again. And I'm actually going to go back in and redo the center of it now. Lower it back down again a little bit more. But again, it's that never-ending chess match. It's maintaining a look that you want to see for your tank. So this is Berger Acropora from Joe Berger. The two big colonies there in the center and then to the right. And this section of the tank's beautiful. I mean, it looks like a full-blown reef with massive coral colonies. But I kind of liken it to you got a haircut a while ago, and it's staying nice for a while, and then like within like 2 weeks, it gets crazy, and you're like, I got to go get a haircut. This is where this section of reef was getting. It looked great, and everybody loved it, and I loved it, but it's on the verge of becoming a problem. So when you look at this burger acros, and again, so that central groove that's in the middle of that picture, corals have grown to the surface. It's causing problems with water flow and with my scuba hose getting hung up on there. So here's some of the clippings of cutting down the burger acros. On the far right, you see those white spots. Those are the branches that were cut down. And now you can see the further back into the tank, and behind them is about 10 or 12 Heteractis magnificent enemies that have been reproducing back there, but had lost that view to those. So pruning those corals down allows that view to open back up again, allows for more water flow as well. So I didn't do the entire colony at once. It's good to do like a section of it, let it recover, and then again, this is only good if your tank is doing well. Don't think you can cut your corals apart if your tank is not doing well. And then here is the tank as the right side has grown back in again on the burger aquapore, and I lowered down the left side of it. But that groove is still pretty tight where there's supposed to be a lot of good water flow. And there's still a lot of coral near the surface. So continuing that, you can see the stylophores there. So that green stylophore, just for perspective, is maybe about between 30 and 34 inches across. And then the aquapores and things have grown to the surface. And then the view through that purple milka stylo is now obstructing. So again, cutting a swath through that, this is looking down on it, cutting a swath through that purple milka to open up a view again of distance, removing some of the purple stylos away from that really nice poecilopora there. Again, so deciding which corals stay, which corals go. So now the view from the front is that groove has opened back up again. There's water flow. The corals are still pretty dynamic. And then there's a big hydrophora plating down in the coral there too. I don't know if it's in the previous pictures. Let me just go back. No. But some of that was removed. And again, now it opens up that view. And really, if you didn't see it beforehand, you wouldn't even know anything was done. But again, it's maintaining the aesthetics of the tank and for the health of the corals also. One thing you'll see a lot in my tank and I really like about was Laura and I got to go to Fiji for a South Pacific dive with her family, and you'd see these big parent colonies of whatever coral, and then down current you would find smaller colonies of that same coral. So as those fragments broke off, they would land downstream and then generate smaller colonies. And it was really, again, a very subtle thing, but just made it look so real. And I had a new appreciation for that. So I've been doing that. So underneath this green stylo, you'll find smaller colonies, some that I placed and some that just broke off naturally, because when you have huge tangs and things, they bump into corals and break off thumb thickness. I don't know how they break corals, but they do. And down at the bottom of the picture, there's a blue milka, a blue stylo that some green stylos had fallen into. Two of them had fallen, and it looked great. It was just like this green with the blue contrast. So I plunked a few more in there. So again, just looking at real reefs and how they do it and incorporating that into the design gives you a much more natural looking reef. And so that downstream look is pretty cool. Or if your tank is deep enough, the vertical drop, because they're going to drop pieces down below it. So growing the corals, it's something that we've done for a long time in our hobby. I think my first aquapores that I propagated were back in like 1992. And we've been growing corals for a long time and making big colonies out of small colonies. You'll notice this graphic's probably a little fancier than my other ones because Laura did it for me. So we've got a single milka frag on the left and then a colony on the right. So when you're looking at the colony on the left, when you have just a single branch, it can really grow a lot of branches quite quickly from that one branch, versus the big colony can only do a few around the perimeter, and then the majority of it can really only grow vertically. It really can't contribute to the volume of the coral. Here's a section of reef where I had an acropora. A good section of it died off in the middle. It all happens. We all lose our coral sometimes for whatever reasons. And what I did was transplanted a bunch of single milcostylos on top of where the dead acropora was, plus one small colony. So here now, all these single pieces can do what we showed in the previous video. So now they can all grow cubically very quickly. How many in here? Laura has a lot of graphics going here. So what's interesting is we've been doing this for almost 30 years with our corals, and now it's really great to see that application being used in the wild, where they're growing out big colonies of corals now. Instead of waiting for one little colony to grow out, they're growing out and restoring reefs much faster. This growing out, this process, they split and reproduce quickly, and they easily become a big colony within a year or two versus 7 or 8 years. So it's been a great thing for people who are rebuilding reefs now. And so here's a shot of that. Also maintaining the corals. So this is that same groove that I showed earlier, just kind of behind the Berger's acro, and opening part of that up. So this is about an 85-pound piece of stylophora that had grown in. So it only had like a living skin, a very little bit of living tissue growing around it. But most of this is going to go to Rutgers University. We're helping them with a calcification study. So again, opening up that view, getting that look that you want for the reef. Here's a piece of the milcostylo. It's about 25 inches across there. I pulled out some of the live rock that hadn't been moved from that tank for 17 years. And then installed a plastic, I think this was a Lowe's shelf in that area to extend that rockwork back more. And here it is with putting back some rock and coral and just kind of expanding, again, the view. And then here's that view again with the Berger acro cut down. And now that view continues off into the distance. So again, creating a very nice look within the tank. We have corals and they die. There's no two ways about it. The Seriatopora on the left doing beautifully. The Seriatopora on the right completely dead. Same colony, grown from the same colony, 6 inches apart. Left colony, no problem. Right colony started showing some signs of tissue loss. Maybe had been whacked by the sprung stunner behind it, and then that lobophilia underneath it could have started the initial infection, but we're not really sure. Here's the entire colony, pretty much dead. There's a few branches that are still alive down the lower section there. Sometimes I'll act quicker and remove them. This one I wanted to see what was going to happen since I had a lot of Seriatopora in the tank. So I think the initial damage was done by maybe some sweeper tentacles at night. So here's the coral. Again, there's a few pieces that survived, and I took a beating on this Julian and Raj. You can't really tell in that shot, but that's Julian and Raj questioning my reef keeping abilities, making me feel really guilty about it. But here it is. I took those few remaining branches and just planted them back in. And again, it's a great way of re-aquascaping your system. This has nothing to do with the talk, but it's really cool. I went out to the front of the reef tank one day, and this guy was taking photos with this glass sphere in front of the tank, and it was just really cool to watch. So if you want to see some cool things, they're on Amazon. You can just buy glass spheres, all different sizes, and it's just, it looked like a globe. It was like a globe of a reef tank. It was really pretty special. So again, corals are growing in, this green Seriatopora in the middle there, totally blocking this groove, and the Montipora next to it. So again, trying to maintain a certain look to the tank is really important. So here I am diving in the tank to remove that coral and then prune back. Again, there's just so many layers of dead coral underneath this because they're growing to the light, and that's what they do. They want to build reefs. So bringing down some buckets, putting the frags in there, and then reassembling a smaller piece of the Seriatopora. That groove is now opened up again, and water can flow. Light can now get down to corals that were getting shaded. And this is just a cool shot of that Monte. You can see where it was originally planted, right down near the bottom, right down in here. I'm pointing to the very bottom there. And then it just plated in verticals and plated in. So that creates great little homes for fish and things like that. This is kind of the right side of the tank. There's that nice green Acropora in the middle there with the purple tips. Beautiful coral. But now again, aesthetically, it's throwing off the image of the tank. It's starting to block the purple Milka. It's blocking a nice Acropora behind it. And then aesthetically, it's just getting a little awkward to my eye. And then my eye twitches, and then I have to dive in the tank. And here it is cut back down. So you can see the white parts where it was freshly cut. I still want it to be even shorter than that, but again, not doing too much at one time and letting it recover and then going back in and then cutting it up again is a way of maintaining a certain look of your tank. This used to be a huge, big Stuber Acropora, comparable to the one that I was carrying earlier. What I did on this one was I cut a swath through the middle of it and I lowered the left side down, just again to open the view back and for water flow, and then laid a bunch of branches out horizontally and they'll eventually grow vertically. And here they are a little bit later on. And this is me not too well organized on this dive, holding a bunch of the Acropora as I was pruning. So I had planned on doing a number of different dives prior to coming to this MACNA for some more renovations on, again, pruning and this whole bonsai concept. But unfortunately, I'm pointing to the dead part of my right lung because I had a pulmonary embolism. So I can't dive at the moment. And that kind of bummed me out because I really wanted to do a few other projects for this talk. So my public service announcement, as you guys are flying home or driving long distances, make sure you get up, exercise. It can happen to anybody at any time. I was really fortunate where it lodged. Several other places, I wouldn't be standing up here. There would be another speaker here right now. So yeah, I'm not dead yet, and I'm still around. So I'm very glad to be here on many levels. But I'm kind of relegated right now because I'm not going to be breathing any compressed gases for a while. So working from the surface, I can still access quite a few things. Let me see. So that was pruning some of the Burger Acropora. And this is just a shot just to show, like, you don't realize, especially if your tank is getting older, how much dead coral there is in your tank, taking up huge amounts of space and time and everything else, and collecting detritus. So these are some pieces of Stylophora, the purple Milka, that have since died off because they're below the light. And there's a quarter there, just to show you the thickness that these things have gotten to. So it's really important to really think about, like, look at your tank and be like, wow, man, there used to be so much room over there. And what's nice about it is that keeps you inspired, that gets you back into your tank. It's a long relationship. I'm in a 17-year relationship with this tank, and I need to keep it interesting for me as well. So getting in there and doing some renovations on your tank is really good. And especially if you have a smaller tank, if you prune it and maintain it you can make a smaller tank look like a huge tank without perspective, and depending on what size fish you put in there, depending on how you manicure the corals. I had asked Austin to send me some pictures of one of his manicured tanks, and he misunderstood and sent me some really disturbing manscaped pictures, which I'm obviously not going to use in this lecture. Manicured. There's never not a reason to use this slide in any talk. It's Simon on the left, Rich Ross in the back, and Charles Delbecq and little Sanjay. It's in every talk, sorry. So fish management, when we're talking about this whole bonsai concept also of reef keeping, like wait, you think about corals, but fish and their size and their perspective can throw things off. So I had a number of really large tangs in my tank, and they could have lived their entire lives in it, but they were getting so large that even though I had big corals, the corals looked small because these big tanks would go by. So here's a video of removing one of the tangs. I'm going to be throwing in some floating pellet in here in just a second. He's going to come from the top of the tank, top of the video, and you'll see me snag him here in a second. So again, some floating pellet. People ask how you remove fish from this tank at times. This is one of the methods. So here he comes for the pellet. He's coming in right now. So again, really research your fish, depending on what size tank you have, what size tank you might be getting in the future. So this is a very big fish. Think about the bio load that this fish is putting on my tank, and we're going to talk about that in a second. No, it's playing. So you'll see some really heavy-duty work gloves on this picture, and I used to have lighter work gloves when I removed a few of the other tangs out of the tank, and they sliced right through them and split my finger wide open. They do call them surgeon fish for a reason. They've got that spine at their caudal peduncle area there that is beyond razor sharp, a surgeon. So I got some heavier duty gloves, and you'll see the size of this fish. And again, this is a tang that's commonly available in any hobby store. So aside from having a tank that can keep it long term, think about it from the aesthetic point of view of what you want your tank to look like. When you look at a lot of videos of reefs in the wild, there's not a whole bunch of huge fish in one, they're usually cruising around. So I'm the proud fisherman now. I want a picture of me with my catch. So again, my trusty assistant Laura there, taking some photos. The fish is pretty big, it's pretty strong. You can see a little wiggle here, and that's me dropping it back in the tank. There's a really good reason why there's no audio playing right now also, because if there's children in the audience, that's part of the problem. But you'll see the splash here as he swims off. And I thought maybe I'm never going to catch this fish again. But I am proud to say I actually got him with the same method 4 hours later. So not the smartest fish, but this is what they grow into. And if you notice, a lot of fishermen hold their catch out like this, right, towards the camera to make it look. My arms are pretty tight to my body. These are big fish. So judging your fish, now I could get smaller fish back in my tank. It helps put things back in perspective from this whole looking like a miniature reef kind of thing. So I can do a lot more anthias. The amount of food that tang would eat versus 100 anthias, things like that, and chromis, and so it's a lot nicer view. And then you can start seeing some more natural behaviors as your corals are getting bigger and chromis and things hiding in and out of the branches. Let's see. So as time goes on with your reef tank, right, things change. Here's the boys years ago when they were helping me at the aquarium. My 3 boys. It worked out great here because they'd all clean different heights of the windows. But then they do this. So over time, just adjusting your feeds, dosing, lighting, flow, et cetera, as your corals grow. What worked in the first few years might not work in subsequent years. So be really careful about that kind of thing. Again, what's your end goal? What you want your tank to look like. Make sure you have ample filtration. Some protein skimmers that I built for the aquarium those would do about 200 gallons per minute. And again, the corals can grow big. How do you want the aesthetics of your tank? Todd rewards himself with gin When I get a little frustrated with my tank sometimes, I tend to go with the vodka method, and that works out pretty well. Again, depending on what tank you're looking to do and what biotope you might want to represent as far as your little bonsai reef tank. There's about 25,000 watts of light over this tank. I am stepping into some of the LEDs. There's some Coral View max spec 300 and 500 watt LEDs above the tank right now that are performing very well. If things are going well, fish are happy, and you'll see a number of fish online now, especially in smaller tanks, that as long as the environment is good, you'll get them spawning. And here's some Genacanthus angels, and there's a spawn there. That was the first time we saw them spawn. And Noel, right? That's the one we've raised. Noel, it's a first for the industry, getting that fish raised. Sponsorship and money is always good as far as collecting the larvae, so we do get some sponsors, help things out a little bit. Can only keep the net in the tank for 4 hours or so. So, keep an eye out for reef gen corals. They grow their own. They frag a lot from the reef tank at the aquarium. Very important for record keeping, no matter what size tank you're doing. Keep track of like when you fragged that coral, or you'd be really surprised how fast time goes. When did you change the carbon last? When did you change that light? Really keeping that record keeping. You'll be surprised. You'd be like, I just did that, and you realize it's a year ago or something like that. So record keeping, monitoring, things like that. I just write the dates on some of the lights just so I can keep track of what's going where. Just a little bit of text here. You guys can read that. I'll just read over it. Why do some tanks not accept certain corals, or tanks that used to house certain corals can no longer keep them? My tank for over 14 years could not keep Seriatopora hystrix, pink bird's nest, alive. Could grow it in the other tanks at the aquarium, considered a weed. Something in my tank was missing. Tried many different things, tried growing it within the tank, attached to tanks that are with the tank, couldn't get it to grow, but I finally have it growing again, and I really don't know. I will say, in starting to use, you've heard Austin use ESV's name quite a bit. You're not going to find a more stand-up guy in the industry than Bob Stark, and we've been playing with this ESV transition elements. It's an iron, manganese, and a few other goodies. And my correlation with the Seriatopora started with dosing this system, or this element. It's not a system, it's just easy to dose. So I do draw a parallel. Those of you that know me, I don't really endorse things. If I find something that works really well, I would definitely talk about it. Yeah, Aquarist of the Year. You know, I got that last year, and I can't believe how fast and what a year it's been. I think it's been kind of a crazy year all around. For those of you that might not be able to read this, my hat says "Make Reefing Great Again." Just looking out here, I can clearly see this is the highest attended MACNA lecture ever. So I'm very proud of that as Aquarist of the Year. It's the best Bigly event. It's huge. Just want to review my year as Aquarist of the Year, and what I brought to the table. Countrywide, coral sales are at their highest. There's more pet stores opening each day. Let's see what else. Yeah, it's been a good year. I mean, I can go into any reef store and I just grab the corals without even asking. I don't even have to ask. I just grab them. It's great. There were 21 previous Aquarists of the Year before me. I'm number 22. And don't get me wrong, they were all really good guys. A lot of them are my friends. But I can tell you I've done a lot more for the hobby than all 21 of them combined, just in 1 year. I brought Raj from MRC back to the United States to manufacture his product in the United States. A few other companies are on their way. Yeah, well, Raj is a good man, and his wife's pretty hot. Yeah. So, I've stated many times, I started through the years, I've been doing this a long time, but I started so many coral restoration projects like Seacor and the Coral Restoration Foundation, and my assistants, Dirk Peterson and Ken Niedermeyer. It's hard to see out, it's pretty bright. I'm sorry, what was that? I'm just making stuff up? Who's that? Oh, that's Rich Ross, folks. That's Rich Ross, the skeptical, oh, you're that skeptical reef keeper. Oh, and who's that Randy Donowitz just happens to be sitting next to you from that fakenewsreefs.com. Yeah, huh. Funny you guys are sitting together out there. And that Reefs magazine that you guys do, a lot of fake news there. So Raj, get him out. Get him out. Raj, where's the hat? Where's the hat, Raj? All right, you know what? And if you have to, punch him in the face, knock the crap out of him. I'll pay for your lawyer's fees. All right, you know what? Never mind. Let him stay. Let him stay. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. If I do it online, I'm going to do it in person. But it's, of course I joke, but for us it's important to laugh together rather than quietly or not so quietly harbor anger against each other. So in these tense times, as the soon-to-be former Aquarist of the Year, I'm promoting the platform of keeping reef great again. So how do you continue? And thank you to Laura for I don't know if she wants to be known as the one who got the hats made up for me, but but I love this hat and I will use it. So to finish up with, we got to talk about spicing up your reef life, right? We get complacent, we get bored, we set up tanks, we have a responsibility to these animals. I've got fish that are over 20 years old and corals that are going to be 27 years old this year. So we have long-term commitments. Got to keep it interesting for you. And even though he writes that fake news magazine, Randy's done a lot of work on his tank recently and doing those renovations and sculpting things out. And it's really refreshing. It re-energizes you and gets you really excited about your tank. So I highly recommend just going back, looking at your tank, saying, wow, there's almost no water over there anymore because everything has been growing. Think about going in there and really excavating it. Not the whole tank at one time, just do a section at a time. So do something to reignite that passion in your tank. This worked pretty good for me. That reignited some passion, getting engaged to Laura. So yes, a touching end to my talk. Again, thank you to the gang down here for the invite. It's really wonderful being down here. Raj, if I need an escort out of here, I will take it. If anybody has, I don't know where we're at with time. We're good on time, so we ran through some good things. Oh, and all right, since we got this, if Lemon gives any of you guys trouble, just give Sanjay a call, and he'll put him in the sleeper hold. If he starts talking too much about wrasses and things, just Sanjay will put him in the sleeper hold, and that'll be the end of that. But if anybody has any questions on anything about as far as my tank, there's so much to talk about on that tank on every level. Nutrient control, anything. I'm here all weekend. I never get tired of talking about things like this. I tend to talk a little better if you come to me with a beer, just saying. But otherwise, I love talking about tanks. So if anybody has any questions, be happy to answer them now or through the weekend.